lowercase on that one. Please, this regular meeting of the Joshua Basin Water District Board of Directors for November 6th is now in session at 5:30. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. The flag is on. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I may, I'm a little concerned about this microphone blocking our view of that screen. So anyway, just sharing it. Thanks. Hi.
Item 2, determination of a quorum. General Manager Johnson, a roll call, please.
President Flowing,
President.
Vice President Doolittle.
Here.
Director Fick.
Here.
Director Charlesburg.
Here.
Director Short.
Here. Thank you very much. All the directors are present in the boardroom. We have a quorum. Item 3, approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
So moved. Seconded.
Thank you very much. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Public comment time. This designated time is for members of the public to provide comments on any district-related matter, whether appearing on the agenda or not. Under provisions of the Brown Act, the board is prohibited from taking action on items not listed on the agenda. At the discretion of the board president, comments on a particular agendized item may be deferred until that item is heard. Is there a public comment? Hearing none, public comment time is now closed. Consent calendar, item 5. Consent calendar items are expected to be routine and non-controversial to be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. The board member would like an item handled separately, it will be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Do we have anybody that wants to have an item removed from the consent calendar? That would be the October board minutes for October 16, actually.
Not me. It's never not going to be funny. Just looking at you.
Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, David. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Presentations, this is for information purposes only, no action will be taken. Public outreach. Public outreach consultant Kathleen Rednich will provide a report on outreach activities. If you please.
Happy November to everyone. Special thanks to President Sloan and Director Short for holding down the district's booth at the annual Great Shakeout last month. I think it was one day that blew you away, but thank you. And helping people learn about water for emergencies. Additionally, an extended thank you for those district candidates who campaigned door to door, educating us well on water for emergencies. And congrats to our incumbents for running successful campaigns. The Strategic Partner Grant Conservation Ag campaign is in full swing. This 10-week ad set season is running the message, imagine a day without water. And then I have heard from numerous customers how grateful they were to get a call from our customer service department alerting them that our system indicated a potential leak on their end. I'm not sure if this gratitude gets back to the office or field staff, so I want to let you know these courtesy calls are making a difference. I personally, unfortunately, received 2 of them in the last few months, so that was kind of pricey, but it would have been worse had I not gotten the alert. Classes, courses, and events lining up for 2025. While they're kind of locked in, they could change, but I will be putting a sneak peek of them in our next December newsletter. And with first up, January would be the 15-week course on desert edible gardening All in all, at last count, we'll be offering to our community this 15-week course, plus a 4-week wildcrafting course in May, 6 standalone classes, all aimed at water conservation, and 3 seasonal events. One will be our plant sale. And not to forget tomorrow night, if you haven't signed up and want it, we have at 6 p.m. on Zoom, we're teaching on winterizing your home, and that information is in our November newsletter. I attended the county's land use department's open house and scored great connections with quite a few of the departments, resulting in instant informative notifications of their many service events coming up. And if appropriate, I will be adding them into our newsletter, but the ones that they were talking about do help protect our groundwater. So I find it very helpful, and we weren't on their list. So by the time I heard about it, it was too late for our newsletter to get the word out. So they're really happy that we're going to work with them on getting the word out. And so that was worth the time spent making those connections.
Who was that? I missed
The
who.
county land use department.
Land use,
Well, they
okay.
have different departments, and I was getting confused who I was talking to there. They really have quite a few in there, but it was really a good opportunity. And not many people came, but we were there. It was good. And then a reminder that the district will be closed for Veterans Day, Monday, November 11th, Thanksgiving Day, Thursday, November 28th. And since I won't be reporting until spring, it will be also a reminder that Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, 24th and 25th, as well as New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. The office is going to be closed. So that is my report. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the board? Hearing none.
I did have one question. How do we determine somebody has a leak and call them? I don't know this.
You want to talk about our process for?
Once the reads come in, we don't have something that's in the moment. But once the reads come in, if the read appears to be out of the norm for that particular customer.
Now, is that digital or is that somebody eyeballing this? How's that?
Well, it's technically a combination of both. So
Okay.
the reads come in from the field staff and they're uploaded into our system and it's reviewed manually.
And Excel is used to be able to highlight anything that's out of the ordinary under the, we use a standard, and I think it's 10 units. It also depends on the time of the year. So summertime is gonna be a little bit higher, but we can get more information. Mercedes, our customer support billing supervisor, is the one that is in charge of that program. And she does a really good job of making sure that anybody that's outside of their normal use gets a call or a letter.
But you wait till there's 10
That
units,
seems-
unusual?
Well, it depends on.
Because that's a big jump.
Yeah.
Well, it could be, but what if a customer is normal, 50 unit user?
So it's not a percentage, like you're 50% higher than you normally
Let
are.
me retract.
Okay.
I'll get you what the exact formula is so that it's not for the next time.
Thank you, guys. That's all from me.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Kathleen. Item number 8, discussion and action calendar appointment of new Citizens Advisory Council member.
All right, well, thank you. Tonight, we have Mr. Smith, who joined us at a recent meeting discussing a water bill situation that he had, and we ended up having a good conversation, and everybody encouraged him to please join the CUC, and fortunately, he listened, and he's here tonight to tell us a little bit about himself. So Mr. Smith, please take the lectern and feel free to introduce yourself.
I always love talking about myself. I guess the thing that I've always lived by is I've always been active in whatever community I've been in. When I was young, I volunteered while I was still in high school to help with younger wrestlers. They had like a Pee Wee league. And then that extension just kept going as I got older. And I always took an interest in the community. And I became an educator and a coach. But even before that, when I first met my wife out here, she was teaching at Friendly Hills, and she would do plays and stuff. Well, I got volunteered to help to build the sets and different things, and you meet the community and you become part of the community. And eventually I bought a house in the 90s, just above Friendly Hills on Natoma, and volunteered as a T-ball coach here in Joshua Tree and Yucca throughout the community. So I've been active, you know, in the community and interested in the community and pay attention to what happens in the community. Part of that is because of what I teach, government and economics, you know, and the levers of government. So, and it's important. We need people to participate, or it doesn't work. It doesn't work correctly, or it only works for the few that participate and the rest get left out. And then I got asked to submit my paper for the advisory board. And it's just an extension of what I do. I don't believe people should just gripe and not present solutions or try to become part of the solution. It doesn't work that way. You can't depend on somebody else to fix the problems. You gotta work as a community to do it. So that's why I submitted my paperwork to be considered.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Vice President Doolittle, anything?
Well, thank you so much for hearing us and coming back and wanting to participate. So I'm delighted about that news. I just have a couple of questions. Are you concerned about the impact of climate change on the high desert?
One of the first things I teach in my economics class is we have unlimited wants, but limited resources. And that's exactly why we study economics. We have to manage those resources so we don't run out of them. So of course, that's at the forefront of that, because we live in a very fragile environment and water is an issue. I mean, we get rain, what, 10 days a year if we're lucky sometimes, and sometimes we don't. And water is a scarce resource, and it's easy to mismanage it or to not have it because we don't get access to refilling aquifers and other things, especially here in California. You know, water between all the western states is an issue. So yes.
Great, thank you. And not that I expect this or ever heard of conflict on the CAC, but I would like to know or hear, how do you react to conflict on teams?
As far as conflict goes, it's for anything to work, there has to be a give and take. You can't stick your heels in the sand and say, I'm not going to budge on something. I mean, you have to be somewhat willing to listen to the other side and try and find compromise. And that's what I've tried to do all of my life. I've been involved in this school district union and in negotiation between management and staff. And there's a lot of conflict, you know, big and little. And that's my job, is to try and find that middle ground. You know, I don't want anybody to walk out of a meeting that I've been involved in and not feel like they haven't been heard and not feel like their side matters and that has been considered. And sometimes people don't get what they want, but that doesn't mean you can't empathize with them and try to make them understand, you know, why the decisions were made. And at the same token, I'm going to question decisions and want to have answers and feel that they've been adequately answered. I think that avoids that conflict, that deep-seated conflict that can't be overcome.
Thank you. That's all from me.
Director Fick?
Well, I welcome somebody with a background in economics or teaching economics.
Well, it's introductory economics, so.
And wrestling, that background in wrestling will
Oh, yeah.
come in handy.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, negotiation mostly, you know, and then the same thing, and that's exactly what it is, even in economics, it's, you know,
It's,
trying to make sure you stretch the resources and it's equitable. And that's my concern as I'm considering joining this, is that the equity. You know, one of the questions I got asked by one of my family members is, why is the water here more expensive than Yucca Valley and 29 Palms? And I said, well, the cursory answer is they've had a lot of expenses recently and they have to cover them. I remember you explained the huge jump in the cost of materials, right? So it doesn't take an economics major to figure out, you gotta pay the bills.
Yeah.
But, you know, and that's one of the things that I think causes the misunderstanding out in the community, is maybe that message isn't getting out as well as it should, that the expenses have been staggering. You know,
Good term.
staggering to a small community like this. And that's the other thing, it's a smaller community,
Still gotta pay the bill.
yeah, but you still gotta, and you gotta meet the state standards.
Director Jarlsberg?
Yeah, I also want to congratulate you for stepping up. And doing it as part of your life. I'm kind of like that too, so I really get it. I'm wondering if you've attended the rate setting workshops in the past for the district while you've lived here?
No, and you know, I just
Okay,
more than, as I get older, I'm slowing down a little bit. But in my younger days, if you look at the paperwork, I was raising a young family. My kids were very well involved and I did a lot of volunteer coaching here and then.
Yeah.
I was coaching at the high school level. I was working in Theater City. I was pursuing my master's and doctorate. So there wasn't a lot of extra time for the periphery. I was just trying to keep up with all that stuff and still managing to do
well,
my job and coach.
Yeah.
So I'm ashamed to say, I haven't had a chance to do that because
that's okay, you're in the majority.
I know, but it's not, you know, again, if you don't have the adequate information, you can't make an informed decision.
That's part of my point, is
Mhm.
that the more educated you are, the more you will understand why the rates are the way they are.
Mhm.
And also why the board has made the decision as we've had alternatives to consider. And I also want to make a point about economics. I don't think there are too many people in this world or this country that even have a basic understanding of economics. So I'm really glad it's still in the school.
Yeah, it's actually,
I mean,
you
you know,
can't graduate without it.
Civics and government I had in school, and they're just like dribbling away, and I could see economics doing that too. So I appreciate that it's still happening here. It might help us have a little more educated population to deal with. Yeah, you already brought up the fact that we're covering a large area for a small population. And that is part of the reason it's more expensive for each person to help continue the function of this district. Anyway, I encourage you to continue attending all the meetings that you can so that you're informed. So that any concerns you bring to us, they're informed concerns also. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Short?
Yes, I first want to say thank you for stepping up to serve the community. I see you've got a extensive history of service around here, and that's very commendable.
And as I was sitting here, I was thinking, oh, I didn't mention this or this. And at some point I was looking at it, I wanted to keep it down to one page.
Yeah,
I actually did trim it back a little bit because One of the other things I teach is a transition class, which is going out and being employed. And I understand that people have about 30 seconds to look at most everything. So you got to get their attention fairly quickly. So I was keeping that in mind as well.
Yeah, no, it's good. We need more, definitely need more people like you in this community. I saw you were in the Marine Corps. How long did you serve?
Well, 2 years. I served 2 years. I actually was scheduled to serve 6 years, but the evil empire fell over. And then they decided, well, we don't need 145,000 Marines. We have to get down to 70,
Lucky you.
75,000, so they in the herd. And unfortunately for me, there's the most populous MOS in the Marine Corps is a basic infantryman of 311. And the second one is a 2531, which is a field radio operator, because every unit has to have communication. And that's what I was. So it's easy to thin through those groups.
Yeah.
A lot harder to go through somebody who's got 2 years of training in repairing jet engines. So.
Okay, yeah, well, that's just, I think.
But I am very proud of my service. And even then, that's what I was sitting here, because I was in charge of taking care of the barracks maintenance and stuff like that again. And I think I was 23 at that point. You're talking about $2 million worth of property that I was responsible for and had to make sure it was serviced, and repair orders were put in and stuff like that. In addition to the comm shop, I was also in charge of the comm shop. So like I said, keep busy most of the time.
Okay, so after you left, what kept you here?
Well, I met my wife. And my wife was teaching here at elementary school at Friendly Hills. Because I really had no plans to stay here, but my wife, once we got married and we started having a family, my wife didn't want to move away from the security of a steady paycheck with children, so he stayed.
Okay. All right, that's all for me. I think we'll be lucky to have you.
Citizens Advisory Council Chairperson David Carrillo, do you have a comment on the matter?
Yes, I'm glad to see that you came back. I think you have a lot to add to our group. It's a good group, and look forward to working and speaking and working through things with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're privileged to have you. It sort of reminded me a little bit in one of your comments there about the Gettysburg Address. One of the last phrases in that was where Lincoln said, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We don't participate, we're done. And I can tell you too that from experience, this Citizens Advisory Council is a real thing. They do have influence. The general manager, I've said this many times, the general manager very much wants to hear from community members and receive guidance from them, minimally of an opinion on how to behave with the water company and our resources and the money. So yeah, just repeat, we're fortunate to have you. I think we've kept you standing too long.
Well, I'm laughing because I just remembered one of the things I absolutely should have put on there that I totally, just because I've done it so long. I'm actually on the school advisory council as well. I've been on the school advisory council. Maybe I did mention it briefly or I alluded to it, but for 10+ years plus doing the union. But that's part of being the union rep. And of course, a big part of that is again, managing the money and where does the money go? Where is that allotted to, and did we get out of it what we expected to when we allotted it for it? So
that last part is a big deal.
Yeah, because it's accountability and it's accountability to the public. That's why we have it. And the hardest thing we have is to get public participation.
Yeah.
Public,
Because
we try to, we have to have at least one, I think it's 1 or 2 people from the community, and we have to on our knees beg sometimes for people to show up. We don't see it as that important, but it is.
it's the busy people that show up.
That's true.
Yeah, So unfortunately, sometimes it's just the same five people that do all the work and all that. Different committees.
So is there a motion to approve the appointment of Melvin Smith to the Citizen Advisory Council?
I'll make the motion.
Second,
I'll second.
those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries.
Yeah, thank you very much.
When's the next meeting?
It's November 12th, so next Tuesday at 5 p.m.
And there you go.
See you there. And I'm looking forward to it as well. It sounds like we have a lot to share with you and you have a lot to share with us. I'm more interested in knowing about your class that bridges students into employment. I have some
Totally.
ideas
It's
about
half
that
my
too.
Olympic and selling that. We take a field trip down to LA. It's kind of like a mobility, teaching them how to use public transportation. And we go down to LA and we let the kids go to Little Tokyo and Chinatown. And it's kind of a fun day for them. And we were on the way back to ride the train out of Union Station. And I missed a step. And concrete. And I don't bounce as good as I used to.
Nuts.
So I've been dealing with that since April. But
Mm.
every day I get better.
We'll make sure you have a seat front and center if you want to watch the match. Thank you. So see you next Tuesday and you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. I encourage you to do so.
Thank you.
Item 8B, overview of groundwater in Joshua Basin Water District Service Area. General Manager Johnson, introductions, please.
Good, so I am excited to bring USGS folks here, John Isabicki and Jeff Cromwell, who I've had the pleasure to get to know over this last year or so. I was not clear, we need to get a hold of USGS, and it seems such like a complicated thing to do. How do you get a hold of USGS? Who is this magical USGS? And it just so happened that Jeff emailed me that same week. So I don't know how that happened, but I'm glad it did. So we've had some good discussions. They've been to our district on a couple of occasions. They brought forth a presentation last time I thought was so good that the board definitely needed to see. So tonight we're going to show you that presentation, talk about our groundwater, and then I'll be looking for some direction and maybe some next steps of possible future projects with these nice folks. So Jeff, if you would, take it away, and however you want to do the presentation tonight, Lisa will do the PowerPoint for you.
Sure, excellent. I think I'll do the presentation.
Okay.
You'll hand wave up there and once I'll drop this down, but I'm Jeff Cromwell, I'm a research geologist with the survey. Don Isbicki is a research hydrologist emeritus, and we did a lot of work, the USGS did in this basin about, last 2 decades or so ago. And so there's a groundwater model out, and we did similar work in the Warren Basin in Yucca Valley. And since that time, time has passed since then. And so in conversations with Sarah and staff is what can be done with new information that has been gained or learned in the last, several years that could be beneficial to the Joshua Basin District managing groundwater resources. So we want to share with you today, and we're here to answer any questions. And pleasure to meet you all. Happy to be here.
So, yeah, the U.S. Geological Survey has no land management responsibilities, no public health responsibilities, and no regulatory authority. Our mission is solely to provide unbiased information to water districts like yourself, and in our case on water and groundwater chemistry. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. I've spoken to this group in the past, maybe 10, 15 years ago, so I don't know if any of you remember.
I remember.
Oh, you do?
I was there.
I'm wondering if you should use a mic because we're recording the meeting and anybody that listens to the recording will want to hear your voice.
It's okay. She's putting a mic on him. Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I say our work that I'm going to talk about today, some of it is 20 years old now. I can't talk about current conditions in the basin necessarily, but I can give you an idea of where we think things are going. Some of that work was done at your recharge ponds maybe about 7 or 8 years ago. Geology doesn't change much. So in this case, board members change. So many of you, this will be sort of an opportunity to introduce you to some of that past work. But hydrology does change. aspects of hydrology that do change are what we would call your boundary conditions, your relationships with your neighbors. High Valley or Warren Basin does something with their groundwater recharge facilities next to your basin. It affects what happens to you. Joshua Tree does some increased pumping. It affects what happens to you. Your own activities within your basin, your control of your pumping activities affects your water levels. Engineering aspects in the basin that occurred in the past few years, septic discharge from residential developments, is just now reaching the water table, changing the water levels in a number of wells that you have within the basin. Your groundwater recharge ponds have increased water levels beneath the ponds and caused pressure responses throughout the basins. So those are all good things that have changed the status of the basin, and particularly with respect to sustainability of your water resources. And that's really important because one of the things that does change with hydrology is regulations and how groundwater management agencies at the state may view things like sustainability and making sure that your water levels are not declining, but you're using your resources sustainable. The other thing that changes with regulations is water quality. When we worked out here in the past, Chrome 6 was not an issue in your water from wells, but with the new Chrome 6 standard, 10 micrograms per liter, a number of your wells exceed that standard. We'll talk a little bit about Chrome 6. So, and then at the end, I have a proposal that we've shown Sarah. I'll say a few words about that, but maybe update the information that you have on your basin. Go ahead and advance, please. So previous work, groundwater basin is about 50. Pardon?
I just wondered if we can ask questions during the talk,
Please,
or
if you have any questions, please interrupt.
I had a question on the map.
Quick, back up. That's great. Yeah, don't be shy about asking questions. Yes, go ahead.
Well, a couple of them just to orient us. Is Coyote Lake the dry lake bed?
Yes, that's the dry lake bed here. We are just about here in this area here. This is a Pinto Mountain Fault. This is a Joshua Tree groundwater basin here, which is the deepest part of the basin. This is the Copper Mountain groundwater subbasin in this area. Parts of that are actually quite deep. 29 Palms groundwater basin is over this way. Water basin, high desert service areas over that way.
Well, I'm aware that Pinto Mountain is in Wonder Valley, and I wondered, does that just mean the fault goes all the way out to Wonder Valley?
Yeah, this is a pretty big fault system.
That's where the old elementary school is, on that fault.
It is a boundary within the basin, but groundwater does move across that fault from the Joshua Tree area into the Copper Mountain Basin. I'll talk a little bit about recharge when we get to the top, but some of it coming from infiltration from streams to the mountains, some of it coming from infiltration from Yucca Wash. There is virtually no aerial recharge or direct infiltration of precipitation in a desert area like this.
And my understanding is that we are quite separate from 29 base as far as water.
You are separate, not from the community of 29.
Yeah, but that, anyway, so our water doesn't commingle with the base.
No, the base is down gradient to the extent that you are connected. You are hydraulically connected to the community of 29 Palms and 29 Palms groundwater basin here. The Copper Mountain groundwater basin subbasin discharges to the 29 Palms area to the north in that area. Pumping at Mayside is quite distant from you. Pumping at Surprise Springs on the base is also quite distant from you. So you're really isolated. I'll show these numbers later, but there's about 200 acre feet per year of groundwater that exits your basin. Most of it through here, some smaller amount through there. So.
Okay, thank you.
No, great. Thank you for asking the questions. Any other questions on the map? Go ahead, advance. And so just, that was about a 54 square mile extent of saturated alluvial deposits. We've cooperated on water resources studies that address the availability of groundwater. There was a groundwater model that was done and completed 20 years ago now. We talked about water quality issues in the Joshua Tree groundwater basin, primarily related to septic discharge from residential development in the basin. Since 1969, water levels in some of the basins have declined more than 50 feet. So that's a pretty large extraction level. In recent years, some of the water levels in some of the wells have stabilized and some have even risen in the last few years, which is good news from a sustainability standpoint,
The question is, what's causing those rising water levels? Is it groundwater recharge from your ponds and imported water? Is it septic discharge, which would also have a burden of nitrate with it, which would be undesirable? Is it just changing in your pumping patterns? And again, nitrate from septic discharge and naturally occurring hexavalent chromium, which I mentioned previously. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. Thank you. This is your groundwater basin right here, about 57 or so square miles. The purple line that you see on there is the boundary of the groundwater flow model that we completed in 2004. And that's a numerical simulation of groundwater flow in the basin and how groundwater levels respond to pumping over the last 50 years and projections into the future. So it's a numerical construct. Groundwater coming in through here, flowing out through here and here. The blue lines that you see there are just thicknesses of the basin and how thick the unconsolidated sediments are that overlie the granites that form the basin boundary. And along this section through here, AA prime, you see here, Central Mountain Fault through there, Copper Mountain Basin here. Along this section, BB prime through here. And you can see your basin is actually quite thick, several thousand feet. But the lower parts of the basin, this lower basin here, tends to be more consolidated, yields poorly to wells. Same with the middle part of the basin. You can see these are your public supply wells throughout the basin through here. They're mostly pumping from that upper system. It's been dewatered by 50 feet. So you have really a relatively thin zone of material that you can extract water from. That is more or less permeable depending upon its depth. And the quality of water changes within that unit also. So depending on what you're extracting from. Yes, Jake?
So those lines at the top are wells?
The vertical lines that you see here are wells.
And which one is 14?
Let me see if I
Is
were
that
to
the deepest one?
14 is the one closest to your recharge ponds.
Yes.
This is probably 14 right here. So, you know, here we are in this area here. Physically, we're located, I think, right now, right about there. Recharge ponds are here. So 14 is the one that's closest to the recharge ponds. If I
Well, I was looking at the top.
About 14.
I was looking at the top picture. The lines are not all, I mean, there's one that.
Here, so
yeah.
14 is not on that.
Oh, I see.
14
Okay.
is on this section.
Oh, okay.
And I think it probably is that well there, if I were to guess. I don't have them labeled. Wasn't intended to get into that level.
Okay.
But I will talk about well 14 within this presentation.
Oh,
So
okay, good.
You'll know a lot of things about 14. Go ahead and advance. And same cross sections that you see here. And one of the things that we did, because you don't have a lot of well information out here, so we use gravity measurements to tell us how thick the basin is. And the way that works is granite is dense. The sands and gravels that compose the basin are less dense. So you measure the gravity across the basin, gravity variations, and you can estimate how thick your basin is. And that's a nice little 3D picture of your basin. I don't have it here for me, but we do have that, or did at least in the past. We had that image on Earth Vision. We could rotate it and you could look at it from different angles. You can see it whatever way you want. But the big thing I have it up here, so you can see where that Pitno Mountain Fault is and the Joshua Tree Basin. It's really, really deep, very thick, a lot of material there, but not all that material yields water to wells. And but it's a visual image of what's in the subsurface beneath you that you can't see from just looking at the sands and gravels across the surface area. But that's what you're living on. That's your water resources right there. Any questions about this?
I'm wondering if that picture could be on our website.
We could get it for you.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's that's why I put it in here, because I thought that is really,
Yeah.
you know, and of course, the little San Bernardino Mountains are here. Copper Mountain's over here someplace, 29 Palms down there, the Warren Basin here. 29 Palms base is over that way. And so, yeah, it is just a really, really nice picture. Yeah.
Oh, I just a quick question. Is subbase and basin interchangeable? Because on your first slide, you had specifically stated sub-basins, and now we're into basin.
I'm using them interchangeably. They actually have legal meaning in
Okay,
terms of the Department of Water Resources has defined these areas. Basins tend to be larger and they are composed often of sub-basins.
okay.
And so the sub-basin is a smaller unit within a larger groundwater basin area. Yes.
Okay. How much acre feet is that green middle? Yes,
The middle, how much water is in storage there? I don't know. And I don't actually have a number for you off the top of my head as to how much storage is in the upper unit. I do have a number of how much you've removed from storage within that upper unit. I'll get to that in a little bit.
And
Yes.
will you be explaining the dotted lines there in B, what those are?
Yeah, I'll actually talk about these in a little bit.
Okay.
This is what is called the Yucca barrier.
Oh, okay.
And it separates the Warren groundwater basin, which underlines Yucca Valley, from the Joshua Tree groundwater basin, which is your purview and your responsibility and your mission to extract and sustain water from. Groundwater is higher here on the upgrading side, flows through this series of faults. Faults impede groundwater movement from there to here. In 1972, they were first identified by the USGS, a gentleman named Lewis. He estimated 200 acre feet per year coming across that fault boundary. In 2004, the model calculation, the amount of water coming across that fault boundary was 84 acre feet per year. And I'll show you some water level changes that have occurred near that fault boundary. An important thing to know is one of the reasons I can show you that is because we have a monitoring well that has been installed at that location. It's been monitored very diligently for several decades. But it is what we would call a multiple depletion well, which means it's screened in different depths within this aquifer. So you get different measures of water levels, you get different measures of water quality with depth within the aquifer. You don't have a lot of that information in the rest of your basin. So we're inferring a lot of what we believe we know from the information that we have from your public supply wells. It's good data, but the gold standard would be the type of information that we have right at this location here. We refer to this, and you'll see it in a minute, as the cemetery wells. So they're right at the cemetery, right? So as you go that way towards high desert. Any other questions? That's great. Ask as many questions as you want, because I can take as much time as needed to explain anything that you need to know. Go ahead and advance. Okay, and this is wells and instrumentation that we have put in as an agency for you all to supplement the information that we would get from your public supply wells and the records that you keep there. The cemetery wells is the only multiple well monitoring site that we have in the basin. By that, I mean it's short screen wells. The entire installation there, I believe, is about 1,000 feet deep. And we have 3 wells screened over short intervals within that 1,000 feet. So we can see changes in water level pressures and water quality with depth. And I'll talk a little bit about those. We put in some water table wells at just up the hill here, I guess, probably your neighborhood, Sunny Slope or Sunny. Did you look just up the hill on the slope here?
No, I live over by the.
Oh, okay, but it's just up that way.
I used to live over that way.
Okay, it's a water table installation. By that, I mean the screen of the well crosses the water table. So it's just measuring and sensing what's happening at the water table. That's important if you want to understand influences from like septic discharges and leach fields and things like that. Things that might be happening on the surface that are reaching your groundwater table. And we have one of those at your recharge ponds also that I'll show data from. And we also collected data from the overlying unsaturated zone. We have instrumentation within there. But it's actually still on the ground. We don't monitor it anymore, but it probably would work. And we put in a lot of sensors within stream channels so that we made direct measurements of recharge from the occasional flows in Yucca Wash and Quail Wash into the groundwater basin. So we're pretty confident in our knowledge of those numbers that I'll give you as part of that, part of your water budget. You talk about economics and budgeting and spreadsheets. It's the same sort of concept. Water in equals water out, or changes in storage or withdrawals from the bank account that you might be living on.
So the blue circles are marine wells, is that correct?
Yeah, the blue circles are wells that we have installed, locations that we put in. The red dots that you see here are public supply wells that you all operate as part of your water district. The green dots that you see down here is instrumentation that we put in to measure recharge along the washes. These are probably gone. It's a pretty rugged environment for a well, and given the flows that you've had, and in the intervening time, it's probably washed them away. But we got a lot of information out of those, so it was important to put it up here. Any other questions? Okay, go ahead and advance, please. Okay, here's the groundwater basin again. Wells that we have data on throughout the area. It's got the well name and the water level elevation. We don't need to be concerned about that so much, but we're going to talk about recharge sources in the basin.
Yeah.
And when I'm talking about recharge, I'm talking about where your water comes from that enters the groundwater system and raises the water table. That's the water that you're going to be drinking in the future. Some of that recharge to the groundwater basin is underflow from Warren Basin. We talked a little bit about that just a second ago, monitored at the cemetery wells here. There was groundwater movement from the Joshua Tree groundwater basin to the north into the Copper Mountain groundwater basin, and septic tanks. Between 1977 and 2001, we estimated that septic tanks within the Joshua Tree Basin contributed about 600 acre-feet per year of water into the basin. And not all of that reached the water table, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. There's a large time delay between when that water is used at the tap, discharged to a septic leach field, and it's 400 feet to water, not much of your basin. So it takes a while, and I'll give you actually an estimate of that. We have those numbers for different zoning densities within your area. So we can be pretty comfortable about those. And we're actually seeing the effects of those now. There is no aerial recharge from infiltration and precipitation. And it doesn't rain much out here, about 6 inches per year on average. The creosote and the desert vegetation are extraordinarily efficient at scavenging all that water. And if you were to drill in the subsurface, I don't show an example of this here, but rainfall has a little bit of chloride in it. All that chloride has accumulated in the subsurface. You see bulges of masses of chloride in there. If you divide that by the amount of chloride of precipitation, it's probably been about 10,000 years since water from precipitation infiltrated into the groundwater basin. A little bit less on the high fans that you see up here, and maybe even some of that actually gets down under present day conditions. Discharge, most of the discharge from the basin is groundwater pumpage, and I think we sort of asked a question about that just a second ago. And the total pumpage from 1958 to 2001 was about 42,000 acre feet. So I don't have a number of how much is in storage in that upper unit of aquifer, but I do have a number of how much you have removed from that upper unit within the aquifer. Currently, your numbers are probably different than mine because mine are old. I've got about 1,500 acre feet per year of groundwater pumpage. I'm not sure if you pump now. You can see where you've made some pretty good efforts at conservation in the past, and those are probably continuing and such. And then, of course, underflow. We talked about this just a second ago to Surprise Springs to the north, the groundwater subbasin there, and to the 29 Palms groundwater subbasin. This is all part of what they call the Morongo groundwater basin and DWR for legal regulatory purposes. And that's about 200 acre feet per year under present day conditions, or at least 2,000 conditions. Most of that water coming across here into 29 Palms, probably about 2/3 of it, and a smaller amount going to the north in the Surprise Springs groundwater basin. Go ahead and advance, please.
I have a question.
Sure.
Go ahead, you first.
So mine is in reference to the septic tanks.
Yes.
Since 2001, we've had a lot of growth since then. Is this something that could contaminate the aquifers in any way?
Yes, and I'll show you some information on that. The growth that you've had since 2001, you probably will not be seeing the effect of that depending upon land use and density, let's say until maybe 2000, 51 perhaps, depending on the land use that you have. The less dense they're packed, the longer it will take for that to get to the water table. The more closely packed they are, the faster. But yes, there are effects, and I'll show you some of that. Go ahead.
I had a question about septic tanks also, but it's kind of in the reverse. Obviously, they are more prone to contamination than sewers because of theirs being self-contained. But the recharge, it seems like we're getting recharge from them
Yes.
and sewers are not. We're not really,
Yes.
right?
That's true.
You know, so
In
it's,
Yucca Valley, they collect it now, they put it into a treatment plant, and they treat it and
Yeah.
remove the nitrate, which is key.
right,
Okay, here, you distributed it across the residential development within the basin. The bacteria are not an issue. They do not survive certainly that long, and they do not make the transit to the water table. So bacteria, human contamination from that standpoint is not your concern. Your concern is nitrate.
right.
Septic, human septic has, septic tanks. I've sampled a lot of smelly tanks, depending on average about 45 milligrams per liter nitrate as nitrogen. So that's a pretty good number, more or less, depending on whether you're just done the laundry or whether you're done. We do a lot of work with nitrogen isotopes, and you are what you eat, and human septic is pretty tightly poised. And we've done some of the work that we published in 2015 for you all took advantage of that to identify nitrate sources. So we'll talk more about septics, and so thank you for the questions.
Yeah.
Advance, please. This is an image that we constructed to represent the potential runoff from different parts of the Joshua Basin area, the upland areas, the basin. The modeled area that you see is right down here, Joshua Subbasin here, Copper Mountain Subbasin here. And most of the runoff, at least from an aerial extent, is occurring up here in the Water Valley area as you get towards the San Bernardino Mountains. The little San Bernardino Mountains have some areas that actually do produce some runoff. Much of the runoff that comes into the wash here is actually coming from areas that are first entering the Warren Subbasin up there and flowing through that wash. It's increased because of urban areas, urbanization that's not reflected on this here. And much of this never actually reaches the groundwater basin. If you look at measured flows out of oil wash, they're actually pretty small. But on the basis of our measured data that we talked about with the sites that we put in along the wash, we calculate about 71 or 70 or so acre feet of infiltration into that wash per year, infiltrating down to the groundwater table. That number worked very nicely in the model. The image that you see here and the estimates of runoff from there are slightly higher, about 160 or so acre feet. We're going to be doing some work with Joshua, or not Joshua Tree, but 29 Palms, where we're going to update some of this modeling with a greater resolution, incorporate some of the urban areas and some of the things that have happened within the basin. That would be a good time to revisit this and take another look at those numbers. It's no more work to do a larger area than it is to a smaller area. It's maybe more work to tell you about it. But it's to actually run the model code is not too much more work. So go ahead and advance.
I had a question.
Go ahead, yeah.
I had a question. I don't know if you can tell, but we're kind of a nerdy bunch. Can you tell?
No. I've my wife and my kids never let me talk about
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell my wife, Becky, it was just great to ask me so many questions. So please, keep asking.
Well, yeah, so I had heard one time that actually it takes 2 years for water from the San Bernardino Mountains to hit the Morongo Preserve. So I don't know what, you didn't mention time, like how long, you said, I heard you say 70 something acre feet a year, but is it, is that water from snowfall from that year? Or is that snowfall from 3 years?
When it rains and you see runoff, that water's moving pretty quickly within hours to days sort of time periods. So that surface runoff is pretty fast. When you're talking about groundwater movement within an aquifer, it tends to be very slow. To give you, we did do a lot of groundwater age dating as part of our previous work here. A typical number for this area here might be about water that was recharged about 2,500 years before present. Much of your groundwater is much older than that, 10 to 20,000 years before present.
Ancient?
So I've come here and I've seen that.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
I just love that.
Me too. So actually what I heard was it was from Gorgonio. Do we get water from Gorgonio?
San Gregorio Mountain is right through here. Water Canyon does not reach up into the higher altitudes of the mountains. This one goes about 6,000 or 7,000 feet up in this area. Pipes Wash is fed by runoff from the peak and which we call it the Whitewater River is also flowed from there. The gap at San Gregorio Pass does allow cold, moist air from winter cyclonic storms to come and enter into the Mojave Desert. And you see that when we see the mountains, it gets cold, it rains and it snows here. You have a little bit of recent recharge, less than 50 years old, that occurs in this part of the larger flow system. And it moves down gradient here, some there at Water Canyon, and groundwater gets progressively older as you go further and further down gradient. As you get into parts of the 29 Palms Military Reserve, some of that groundwater is too old for me to date using carbon-14. I can look back to about 20,000 years using that technology. I would have to use other techniques to get you a refined age date for that groundwater. But as you go deeper within your basin, much of your water is beyond 20,000 years in age. And when I say age, I'm talking about time since recharge or time since isolation from the atmosphere. The water molecules themselves are, go back to the creation of the earth. Yes.
Mine is a little more basic question. You talk about runoff. Does that include snow melt as well as I live on Sunset, and when there's a storm, the rain water comes down from the park down my street like a river. And that's runoff from the rain.
Yes.
So I mean, are these both
I'm including
melt and rain?
I'll show you estimates of runoff from Hurricane Hillary. And I didn't include in this presentation estimates of runoff from the 2023 snowpack that accumulated in the San Bernardino Mountains, which was a record snowpack year, but I'll talk about that.
Yeah, and then Big Bear, is Big Bear on that map?
Big Bear is not on the map. It would be.
Okay, that's what I was, okay. All right.
So maybe a little further up than that.
So we're not getting water from Big Bear runoff?
No, you're not getting water.
Yeah, okay.
All water that you get in your basin is from this area here. You have a very, very large area that you see up here within the park. But the amount of water that actually gets through that system and gets down to you is very, very small.
Yeah.
Most of the water that you're getting is actually coming from this area up through here. And you are at a cusp, as it were. I mentioned San Gregorio Pass, and winter storms come through the pass and kind of blow in here and drop some precipitation in the winter. The summer monsoonal storms dominate out here. And Joshua Tree is actually just about at the dividing.
We don't get anything.
But you get about equal multiple, as you move in this direction, you're winter dominated. You move in this direction, you're summer monsoonal dominated. And for someone like me, that means something when I look at data. So, okay, any more questions about this?
How was it that we were able to accumulate so much water under the ground here?
Well, it's been undisturbed since the last ice age. If you think about what conditions were like in the last ice age, it was cooler, it was wetter. You probably had enough precipitation in the deserts. Well, wasn't desert.
Really desert, yeah, that's.
Yeah, but you probably had enough rainfall that you had aerial recharge, the basins filled up with groundwater at that point in time. As the climate dried and desiccated out, that groundwater remained and just sort of reached an equilibrium with the new amounts of water coming in. And actually you see it This is way off the amount of, I had intended to talk, but I'll just tell my wife how great you guys were. As you move up the fan here to higher and higher altitudes, you can see that you get not progressive, but it has been drier for not as long as it has been in the central core of the basin. And that trend persists regionally across the Mojave Desert. It has been drier for longer in the eastern parts of the Mojave Desert and not as dry for as long, I'm saying that correctly, in the more westerly parts of the Mojave Desert and at higher altitudes. And so regionally, there are some long-term climatic processes that have acted to create those effects, which we can measure and see today. Any other questions?
Yes, so I know that you guys did the, and you mentioned it on one of these slides where you did the drill holes, you did a
Yes.
series of them to measure things. I just love that presentation. That was like 16 years ago. But I'm just wondering if you go down deep enough, are you able to pull up water that in those areas where where it's, mushy water or whatever you want to call it, where it's not water that we're going to easily pump up, that's been
Yes.
sitting down at the bottom for a long time. And then does it tell you something about what our climate and things were like? Or is there stuff? And then I just wonder, is there sloth hairs in there and stuff like that?
Probably not sloth hairs.
Yeah.
But it does tell you things about past climate.
Okay.
We haven't in this area, but in different parts of the Mojave, we have looked at noble gases. And if you remember chemistry, noble gases are non-reactive. Why would anybody want to look at noble gases? Well, they are reactive in the sense of their solubility. And their solubility increases with temperature. So if groundwater gets isolated 20,000 years ago, and the climate is cold, the concentrations of those gases, which don't react once they get trapped,
Higher.
is influenced by the colder temperature at that time. And you can measure that. And it's great fun work. Probably not going to affect how you would manage your system and how you would do it, but we have done for very specific purposes at very specific times. It is possible to do that sort of thing.
It kind of reminds me, there's a few hot springs or geyser areas in the basin, in Wonder Valley anyway, I know about, but
29.
yeah. How deep is that?
We did some work on some of the springs, 49 Palms. Not familiar with it off the top of my head enough to answer your question as to how deep that water is circulated. As far as the springs though, the concepts that we've used to work with them.
Oh, and then Old Women Springs, which is ancient.
Yes, we use the concept of long cycle and short cycle springs. A short cycle spring being a spring that is dependent on last year's or the last 10 years worth of precipitation. And a long cycle spring being a spring that is really driving its water from deeper flow within the system and is dependent on water that maybe was isolated from the atmosphere 1,000 years before, maybe even longer. And that has impact for wildlife purposes. If you move into a drought, you mentioned climate change previously. If you're going into a dry cycle, these short cycle springs are vulnerable to drying and desiccation. And wildlife dependent upon them may be vulnerable. Whereas a long cycle spring that persists for much longer periods of time. Yes.
Oh, that brings up a concern about Bonanza Springs. And I'm curious, how regional are you with USGS here? In other words, Cadiz have been avoiding it for 25 years?
I was on the team that did the environmental impact statement review for Cadiz. You'll hear people say that there's a USGS study of the Fenner groundwater basin of Cadiz impact. There's no USGS study. It was a review of our team looking at their work. I suffice to say that, quoting as best as I can from a 20-year-old review, Cadiz submitted a document that invoked 60,000 acre feet of groundwater recharge from the New York Providence Mountains moving to Fenner Gap. Our number was 2,000 to 5,000 acre feet per year. And my gut reaction is that that number overestimates what's really there.
Oh.
So.
Another thing, about 1999 or 2000, this Josh Springs Water District contracted Western Survey to put together a digital presentation. It was a 13-minute digital presentation of our water basin.
Mhm.
And they said that they were going according to USGS figures. And it's around 2000. It looks pretty much like what you've been showing us.
Yeah, it'd be pretty similar. You know, the groundwater subsurface doesn't change. Most of our work out here was initially published, well, there was work that dates back, you know, back to the turn of the 1900s out in this area by USGS. Lewis in 1978 did a lot of work out here. The work that I have personally been involved with that I'm talking to you about now dates from 2000 to the present. So and I think I've seen that video too. Their information predates much of the more recent work that we've done here that I'm talking about.
I have a question. So this is always kind of the way I think. But I started, so the water canyon, you guys, that's on the way to Pappy and Harriet's off of Pioneer Town Road. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. So I just want to share that.
What?
Water Canyon, he mentioned that earlier. Yeah, and so, and that their water flows, you know, coming through and impacting us. MWA has been doing a lot of surveying in Pioneer Town. And that's something I've picked up. I don't know, you guys probably have as well when we've been attending their meetings, and they did a lot when we got all that rain. Anyway, I just wonder who owns water flows? You know what I mean? It's almost like Colorado River, you know what I mean? If it's, you know, is it owned just by the people underneath, you know, if they're on top of it, or and you know, because it's, to me, it's our water if it's coming this way.
I'm not a water rights expert.
Yeah.
I'll give you sort of a take on the runoff that flows through Warren Basin here. You know, were they to capture that runoff and prevent that water from flowing to you guys, you would have a water rights complaint against them, because that water becomes your groundwater recharge. Don't take me for a lawyer.
No.
By all means.
I get you.
But, you know, if they were to impinge upon the amount of water that infiltrates along this wash, they would be violating your right to that water, which becomes your groundwater recharge.
And then selling it back to us. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's what happens, yeah.
Yeah, so you know, they do recharge up there, but they're recharging imported water. I don't believe at this point in time they're capturing local runoff. I may be mistaken about that. You guys would know better. But we can
And I don't mean to be casting aspersions towards MWA. So, you know, I think they have everybody's best interests at heart. I was just curious.
Yeah, so, you know, it becomes very specific questions that move beyond my ability to really answer.
Thank you.
Go ahead and, okay, this is Hurricane Hillary imagery, and it's landsite, USGS landsite imagery. There are 3 panels here. This panel was collected on August 3. Hurricane Hillary dumped 3 to 4.5 inches of rain in about a day's time on August 20th. So that's maybe half to 3/4 of a year's worth of rainfall coming from one storm. So a very unusual event. It was larger to the south of the mountains and a little bit smaller for you guys up here.
Yeah.
This panel here is showing the landsat imagery on August 23, and this on 5 days later on August 28.
Oh.
The red colors are drier areas. The blue and green colors are wetter areas. So in this more regional small panel here, you can see the San Bernardino Mountains and San Bernardino and San Jacinto Mountains, nice and wet and green, and those nice blue colors. Yucca Valley is located here. The golf course that they irrigate at the time is shown right there, so you can see it. It stands up very, very nice. Joshua Tree is located right here. We talked about Coyote Dry Lake, which is located right about here. And the wash flowing from Water Canyon would come out right about here and down through here and down. You can sort of see a little bit of riparian vegetation through here down into Coyote Lake. Pretty dry before the rain. August 20th, it rains. August 23, I'm assuming most of the surface runoff has stopped at that point in time. And here's Coyote Dry Lake.
Yep.
It's about 400 acres in extent of recent runoff. from that storm. Now, the lake is flat, big flat pan like that, so that's not very deep.
Right,
Satellite passes over, 5 days later, it's
it's gone.
all evaporated.
Yeah,
It's all gone.
it's all on the sides of pickup trucks.
Yeah, it could be on the sides of pickup trucks, or on some poor mom's living room or
Oh,
kitchen floor.
yeah,
It's
that
all
too,
trapped
that
into
too.
that. But, using figures of pan evaporation from the state, that's not a lot of water. I calculate it's just a few inches deep. And it works out to be about 100 acre feet of water
Oh, okay.
that was there.
Huh.
Couldn't have been much more than that, otherwise it wouldn't have evaporated that quickly.
Huh.
So I know that there was a lot of interest in capturing surface runoff at that time. This is a large storm, you know, a storm of record that probably we won't see again in our lives. 100 acre feet is not a lot of water. It's
Right.
not even a tenth of, not a month's supply of water for Joshua Tree. So trying to catch that water and trying to get it is difficult. Now, that said, you did get recharge along the stream channel. And you would have gotten a large amount as that water infiltrated into the channel. And so you would get the benefit of the water from that stream, from that storm, naturally from the infiltration of water. But this water that reached Coyote Dry Lake is just really not that much water.
And it was all evaporated? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And so, again, this is.
Because it's clay, it's a lot of clay.
Yeah, it didn't infiltrate, you know,
Yeah.
clay's not gonna infiltrate
Yeah.
the water, but in 5 days, it was gone.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're evaporating at, you know, a couple, I forget the numbers that I actually used to do this, I looked them up. Pan evaporation rates are a couple tenths per day or something like that of an inch, so, you know, there's not much water to be had there. And so, you know, it looks like a lot of water when you're standing out here and it's raining and you're talking about the water running down your street. And you go down to the wash and it's just bank to bank full and it's like almost a scary amount of water.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
But, you know, really, it's not as much as you would think.
yeah.
In 2002, when we were out here, there was a big big winter snowpack year. And water did flow from the higher altitudes of the San Bernardino Mountains along the course of Yucca Wash and made it down to Coyote Dry Lake and sustained some flow there. I didn't look at those data because they predate this better landsat imagery that we have, but I did look at 2023 data. The snowpack that accumulated in the San Bernardino Mountains that year was a record snowpack. And I was sure that I would look and I would see accumulation of Coyote Dry Lake, of water in Coyote Dry Lake, and there was none. And the reason is how that water melts off. In 2003, it melted off slowly, infiltrated into the ground, maybe sustained stream flows over short distances, but didn't make it down to the dry lake. In 2000, when we were working out here, we had a big gully washer and it made it down there. It's because we had a rain on snow event. And so you have feet and feet of snow up in the San Bernardino Mountains. The warm rain comes through San Gregorio Pass, drops onto that snowpack, melts it off, runs off Red Lake, and in that case, you get. But again, so that's an unusual event, and even the largest snowpack in history, in the recorded history in the San Bernardino Mountains, did not produce runoff that reached Coyote Dry Lake. That's not to say you didn't benefit from it, because it infiltrated along the washes, and so you certainly got water from those events. So, any questions about this? Okay, great. I'll just back up just a second, yeah. Here you are, Joshua Tree, Warm Basin, that's Big Morongo Canyon down there. And you can just get an idea of just how dry that thing is surrounded. Yeah, the desert is pretty dry, particularly now. So go ahead and advance. Okay, we're gonna talk about this boundary. You asked about it previously. The Yucca Barrier that separates the Warren groundwater subbasin from the Joshua Tree groundwater subbasin. It's a series of faults. In 1970 or so, when it was first identified by a gentleman named Lewis, it was about 200 acre feet of water moving across the fault. When we did our work there, it was about 80 some acre feet of water. I think I have the number on there. Someplace about 81 acre feet of water.
85?
85, okay. And since that time, we talked about sewers and the town of Yucca Valley has built their wastewater treatment plant just on this side of the fault in this area here. And they treat the water, remove nitrate, put it in the ground, and they have raised water levels near that barrier. And their concern is they don't want that water to get away from them. Your concern is the more the merrier, let it come across, and it does come across. This is data, these are data from the cemetery wells. There are 3 wells at that site. And you can see like a lot of hydrographs in the basin, they're going one way, you know, basically trending downward for a long, long period of time because of pumpage within the basin, and both basins are being equally stressed. But once they start recharging water from the wastewater treatment plant, you can see you're on, this is getting to be your side of the basin. The gradients have reversed. Prior to that, you had higher levels at depth and lower levels at shallow. Now you have higher levels up shallow because they're putting that water to the surface, raising those water levels. That water is moving across the faults. And this multi-year, pretty straight line of downward declining water levels has flattened off, is even coming up slightly. So for you guys, that's a good thing. They, of course, look at this graph and say, well, we don't want to see that water getting away from us. And so, you know, this is, things change with respect to hydrology because of man's activities within the basin. That's what this is illustrating. And those are the things that, you know, this graph was up to 2025. I can't put a number on this. You know, we haven't looked at the data. Those may be numbers that you may want to know and may want to be aware of in terms of how much that's affecting things, what benefits you get from it, what benefits you don't get from it.
Is that the question mark? Is that a question mark I see there?
I put that question mark on there just because, you know, I'm making the statement that this has to do with their treatment activities there, but I don't have a published report. So
Okay,
keep me out of trouble.
okay, good. It's just from here,
I
it wasn't
don't want Jeff yelling to.
look like a little line.
Question mark.
Okay.
But that's what that's. Go ahead and advance again, please. And any other questions about
I did have one question.
Sure.
What does BLS mean? It says. feet-
below land surface?
Okay, below land surface. Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, please. And other activities within the basin, we've talked about both of them. Your groundwater recharge facilities, you're bringing in imported water, you're raising the water level, you're changing your pumping patterns as a result of that, and septic discharge. And this is just a little cartoon illustration of those processes. And I did mention that you have a very, very thick unsaturated zone, so you want to be concerned with the timing. How long does it take for that water to get down? Septic discharges, a small house, that's less, particularly if that house is sitting off by itself, it takes longer for that water to get down. If you have a dense development, it takes less time and it moves faster. Your recharge ponds, you've got concentrated water in an area, your infiltration rates were amazing at that pond. They were very, very high. And the movement of that to the water table is very fast. Go ahead and advance, please. And this is just that little diagram again. This is Joshua Basin Water District, your well number 10. I believe that's the well right out here.
Behind us that are.
Right behind you. We did some work on that well in 2005. And the question was asked earlier, is the septic recharge affecting the quality of water from wells? And certainly nitrate is your big concern there. Your groundwater in your unsaturated zone is toxic, so that nitrate stays in the form of nitrate. It doesn't get reduced. And this is that well right here. And you can see the screen, depth in feet below land surface. There's the water table near the top of the screen at the time we did this work in 2005. Water levels going down. You would have more information than I had when I put this together. Nitrate concentrations were going up in water from that well. And part of the reason is because that septage is reaching the water table. We got into this well in 2005 and we sampled it while the well was pumping under pumping conditions. And we collected samples from discrete points within that well screen. And that's what these depths are. And if you look at the uppermost sample we collected between the pump intake, which is here, about 500 or so feet below land surface, and the water table, which is up here, 9.9 milligrams per liter nitrogen is in. If you accept that number that I gave you, 45 milligrams per liter is a septic tank nitrogen concentration, that's about 1/4 septic, floating at the top of the water table.
Yeah.
While water comes into the well at depth at much lower nitrate concentrations, consistent with natural background, about 2.5 or so, it mixes in the well. That well is just like a giant mixer, mixing water from all depths within the well when it's pumped to the surface. At the time, 2005, you had a concentration about 4.6 milligrams per liter, as in 4.7, excuse me. And those concentrations have been increasing through time. As the water level declines, this becomes more and more of the percentage of the yield from the well, and that concentration gets higher. So the septic in some areas is helping stabilize your water levels, but you have to concern yourself with the effect of the nitrate in the septic concentration. So it's a balancing act. It helps you towards water sustainability, but it also poses a problem for you for water quality. Yes, you're going to.
So I remember at the presentation, 16 years ago, that, the drilling, the holes that you guys did, you were taking samples and reporting back to us the nitrates in Yucca, the nitrates around here and stuff. And then it seemed to remember that there was a question of, how long, maybe even I asked it, how long do we have before, in Joshua Tree, how long do we have before there's going to be a problem? And I seem to remember that you said 10 years. And so now I'm just wondering what do we have? Do you know? Where are we on that, on a timeline?
Yeah. Show you some timeline
Okay.
here in just a second. If I said 10 years, let's hope I put a question.
Okay. Okay.
This is the well that we called Joshua Tree UZ1. It was up the hill there. It's a water table well, and you can see that trend downward. I had thought, so I think this is about the last time I actually worked on the well, and I thought this well was going to be out. It's going to be high and dry, but it's come back up, and it's come back up because the septic recharge. And in this case, you're up to about 20 milligrams per liter as in. So right at that water table interface at this point in time, you're about half. That area out there, I believe, was originally built in about 1960. This is from our work published in 2015. And there are a number of different graphs in there. This is representing housing density at 64 units on 1/4-acre parcels, overlying about a 450-foot unsaturated zone. And it would take about 50 years for that water to reach the water table. It's about 50 years now. If we asked that question 10 years ago, we're right on schedule. We're starting to see this stuff come down and starting to see these nitrate concentrations go up. You are to some degree buffered. If you go back one slide, please. Your production wells, even in areas of dense, more dense, unsorted residential development, are somewhat buffered because they're not extracting water solely from the water table. They're extracting water from, it's a mixture, from deeper water that does not contain the septage and water at the water table. It does contain the septage. But you can see we're starting to go up. So maybe I wasn't so bad. I went some sloth at the 10-year desk.
So the septic water, the water's been filtered through all our sand and stuff. And I remember you said it's better if people live up higher because there's more filtering of the water. But it's septic. I just want to be clear. That's not just sewer stuff floating at the top. That's water that's been cleaned by the sand and filtered, right? It just has nitrates.
So the bacteria certainly go away.
Right.
The nitrates persist because in this area, your unsaturated zone is largely oxic. The work that we did showed about 5% of it got removed in little perching layers here and there. So not much. In some areas, like if you go towards Victorville, part of Victorville is still on unsorted residential. They have a lot more clay in the subsurface, and they remove a lot more nitrate as that water infiltrates.
Clay does.
Pardon?
Clay does.
Well, the perching of the water on top of the clay is low permeability, the water infiltrates down, hits there and builds up. So it's saturated there. So it's not readily exposed to oxygen. And it can the oxygen can be removed from those layers. And then the nitrate can be reduced microbially to nitrogen gas and leach the
Oh.
system. That happens to a much lower degree in your area because you have very high infiltration rates. You don't have clays in your subsurface.
Right, it hits it
And so,
fast.
you know, that's a good thing. But from the standpoint of removing nitrate, you don't remove very much of that water infiltrates. Yes.
We haven't talked about the leach lines. Isn't that where the water goes into the surface, into the
Into the subsurface.
ground? Yeah, subsurface, yeah. I mean, it doesn't really come from the septic tank. It comes from
No.
the water that goes out into
Yeah,
the.
you have the septic tank and
And
there's a lot of treatment. that
those
goes on.
leach lines water my trees. So it's not going necessarily,
Some of that water in many cases sustains trees.
yeah.
Because people plant.
I don't have to, I don't have to
You
water.
don't have to water them, but you know, some of it gets away in different areas.
Yeah.
And it depends on,
So it
how-
seems like it's kind of a complicated thing, actually.
yeah, it can be very complicated. You
Yeah.
keep it running properly and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. And these are generalizations, but go ahead, advance to the next slide again. Yeah, just say, you know, if you take me on my word that about 40-45 milligrams per liter is a good average septic number, that was about 50% septic. That's water too.
Is there anything besides nitrates that are dangerous in this?
The bacteria is gone.
Right.
In this case, I would suggest any viruses are likely gone also. Personal care products, you know, shampoos, things like that. Estrogens can potentially move through the.
Medicines?
Certain medicines. I mentioned estrogens like, you know, like birth control.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that,
Yeah.
but certain medicines can move through. So that's a whole area of what they call emerging contaminants. And, so yes, if we were to analyze this water for a much more complete suite of constituents, we would likely find, you know, some of your household common use products within there. And that may be something that you want to consider, you know, community education about. You know, if you don't need to use it, don't use it.
Right.
If you do use it for certain purposes, don't flush it down the toilet into your septic system, dispose of it properly. Medicines would be a good example of something like that. So, you know, that would be a very good thing for, you know, community education to long-term
Yeah.
protection.
No, that's what Kathleen does.
On that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, advance again to the next slide. And this is your recharge pond waters. And that work was done between 2015 and 2017. Here's the first flux of water that went into the pond, starting at that blue area here. And this is a water table well, again, at the water table, 400 or so feet beneath that pond. And you can see that water moved down really, really fast. We did a similar experiment with similar equipment like this at Victorville at an area that was less suitable for recharge. It took 2 years for the water to get down.
We're very proud about how speedy our infiltration rate is.
You should be very pleased. You have some of the highest rates that I've seen. You know, the Mojave River, you get along the river channel, it's very, very high also. But for areas that are not along a river channel like that, you know, you have really good material for groundwater recharge. There was a lot of concern at the time that pond was sited in terms of there is a apartment complex near it, it's on septic. And would that water intercept that septage and drag that nitrate down to the water table?
Yeah.
We looked at nitrate concentrations at the water table, and you can see that they increased. They actually got very high, about 50 milligrams per liter as in briefly, and then went down and eventually went down to nothing. What this is not nitrate from the septic. It's nitrate that is naturally accumulated in the soil subsurface over tens of thousands or 10,000 years or so since the climate dissipated and became dry. And there's a lot of chloride there, there's a lot of nitrate there, and that's what you washed out. At this, but once you wash it out, it's gone. It's gone. You'll never have to contend with that particular issue at this site again. And the question is, did that water make it to well number 14? And there's a positive response in water levels at that site. But physically, the water molecules that were brought in from Northern California are distinct and identifiable. You can see what happened here at this well. It moved over in this direction. This is imported water composition right here. Here's well 14, hasn't changed. It was sampled in April. It's right within that cloud right there of data. So,
That was important because we had the well 14 down for that period of time that it was positive for the coliform.
okay.
And we were concerned that that was the reason, but it was not the reason, and it's never been positive since then. So it's a weird anomaly that we had.
Yeah, it would not be because of infiltration from the pond, because of physically the pond water has never reached there, although you do get the hydroelectric benefit.
That's really good news.
Yeah.
And, you know, in a way, you're fortunate that you can see this data because it was never written up and published in a way that we could hand you a report. And it's only because I have historical knowledge of that. So that may be something you want to consider, making sure that, you know, some of this information gets preserved. Go ahead and advance, please. And pumpage is your main source of discharge from the site. And you can see that we did a lot of work to restrain pumpage and growth, and I don't know where you're at now in terms of that. That's about 42,000 acre feet. Almost all of that was extracted from storage. At the time that we did it, you were pumping about 1,500 acre feet per year. I'm not sure what you're pumping now, but it would be nice to update that. And it would be nice to know where we're seeing water level changes at wells, how much of those changes are a result of the hydraulic benefit of imported water use, what benefit you're getting from the money you're spending there, how much of that is resulting from septage and might have an associated negative impact of the nitrate, and how much of that is just from changing of pumping patterns and what you're doing within the basin. And those are complex questions to answer. Go ahead and advance again, please.
You had a question, David?
I was just gonna volunteer. We're pumping around a little less than 1,200 acre feet a year.
Back up it again, please.
Yeah, roughly between 12 and 1,300.
Yeah, so this is, you know, about 15, so you're down here now, so congratulations.
Yeah.
In terms of what the state wants to see in terms of sustainability, you know, they give you a gold star. So those are really good things, and you do see it in water levels in some of the wells that have stabilized, and in some cases even risen. So, you know, I can't say for a particular well at this point in time, what benefit, you know, where the benefit in increased water levels was derived from, whether it was some septage or your imported water or you're changing pumping patterns. But you are seeing some benefits from those different things. Yes.
Question for the general manager. Did I see something about this in our strategic plan? Where we're gonna try and get a better handle on the actual volume that we have of water in the ground relative to our consumption and all that?
Actually, yes, we talked about having USGS study.
Yeah, we did.
Give us the answers to a lot of the outstanding questions that we all have about our aquifers. So yes, this is
Good.
kind of preemptive to that, but it's something that we've talked about for some time that, you know, where everybody has interest in.
Okay, that's the next slide, please. And chromium. I talked to Tracy Nishikawa, who worked with me on the 2000 modeling study working because I didn't think they had a chromium problem out there. Well, at the time, we didn't. The chromium standard in California was 50 micrograms per liter. That was for total chrome. And it was last year they established the standard of 10 micrograms per liter for chrome 6. Chrome 6 occurs in what we call alkaline oxic groundwater. So oxic being containing water, alkaline meaning high pH. Statewide, chrome 6 concentrations are higher. Actually, I think this is Mojave Desert. They are higher in waters that have higher pHs. Your waters being somewhat old, some of them have some extremely high pHs. And dissolved oxygen concentrations, desert groundwater systems have very few natural reductants, things that consume oxygen. So that oxygen persists at relatively high concentrations. So the chromium is in solution in the form of chromium 6. Worldwide, almost all the chromium is in chromite. You have almost no chromite out here in the Mojave Desert. Most of your chromium is either going to be weathered from magnetite, which is really relatively insoluble, or in this area here, probably from hornblende, but probably from the mountains up there, which has lower concentrations. Here you're looking at, 20 to 30% chromium, it's something like this. The hornblende, you're looking at 11 to maybe 530 milligrams per kilogram, but because it's weathering in the presence of water, that's what's contributing to chromium. to your system, and geologically, you can find that material out here. And when you look at it relative to groundwater age, I mentioned it, a lot of groundwater, I gave the number about 2,400, 2,500 years before present. You know, right in through this area here, you see that they all contain dissolved oxygen. That's what that blue color is indicating. As the groundwater gets older, the chromium-6 concentrations increase. So you're going to have older groundwater in the deeper parts of the basin, the deeper parts of the wells that you pump water from. You're going to have older groundwater in the down gradient portions of the basin. So you can control that maybe, you know, through well design and re-engineering, you can control that by which wells you pump for supply. As the water gets deeper and older, the oxygen goes away and the chromium-6 goes away. And so your oldest groundwaters might not have any chromium-6. Those are the deeper parts of the aquifer which yield water less readily to wells, but they also contain things like arsenic. So, you know, it's, you have to look and consider each well almost on a case-by-case basis in order to make sure that the water you deliver to the community meets all, you know, acceptable standards. So go ahead and advance to the next slide. Any questions on chromium-6? Okay. We did put together a proposal that had 3 tasks. We're going to look at first the water budget and some of the long-term water supply forecasts with implications for quality, sort of balancing that high nitrate in the shallow areas, high chromium in the deeper areas. How can you live with that? And what's the best way to manage those issues? And we're going to look at some of the location of natural recharge. Depending on how that worked and how everything worked, we proposed down the line to collect some more data. That data that I showed you with respect to the nitrate concentrations within the well being vertically distributed, that type of information. We talked about putting in some wells, but those are extraordinarily expensive. What are the long-term effects of yield, declining water tables, and mixtures of waters from wells? We'll be discussing that. And lastly, we turn on the groundwater flow model, get it working again, bring it up to date, so that we can answer some of those more detailed questions that you need to know for management in terms of, you know, where are we getting the most benefit in terms of sustainability and managing our water levels, from importing water, from septic recharge, from changing our pumping patterns. And all those tasks 2 and 3 are dependent on what we find on task 1. Go ahead and advance one more slide. And just sort of a summary of that. Because some of that work, particularly with the groundwater recharge model, could be done in conjunction with other areas. It could be done pretty cheaply. So the costs maybe they've changed a little bit since we put this together, but not too staggering, just to at least start getting information together and start bringing this 20-year-old data set to speed in terms of what you're dealing with now. And particularly with the questions that you have in terms of long-term sustainability of the basin, which is what the regulatory agencies want to see being able to demonstrate in the future. So one advance again, please. And if you look closely, maybe you'll see some of you at the recharge pond there.
I see Karen Tracy, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, good. Yeah, so.
Is that the last tour?
No, this would be a while back.
I might be in.
This would be an older picture, so it probably goes back to when it first opened in 2015.
Oh, 2015, okay.
Yes.
No, I wasn't there. I like the rubber ducky though.
Yeah, that's a good touch. And I've asked this one last slide. And, you know, just some of the things that we published in the area here, so that there was a history of it. You have those are all available online. All the data are available online, so you can go ahead and take a look at those and begin to come to grips with the information that you have out there and decide among yourselves what it is that you need to know to move forward in the future. So I think you told me 20 minutes, but I know this was a lot longer than that. So thank you for putting up with me for longer than, yes.
I had one question. So what's the timeline for task 1? How long would that take?
I don't know. I think task 1 was like maybe a year to do the work and then a little bit of time to put in a get a written document out of that. So a couple of
Year and a half.
something like that.
Mhm.
Oh,
I'm going from memory here, which may be dangerous, but I think
Okay.
it will be relatively.
Some of it depends on what the outcome is or what you want from that too.
Oh,
If you
okay.
want something that's citable, that USGS pub, that would extend things, you may put maybe to 2 years or something. If it wants just to be an update of, say, your pumping levels, updating the graph, some of the work like the VCM itself, that's a published model that's already out, and so we can pull that information and just hand that to you because we're just pulling it from the citable model that's already existent. So some of that, depends on what you want and how we target those tasks.
And the technology has changed since the last time you guys did this, right? I mean, do you use LiDAR and stuff like that now, or
For this particular project, we wouldn't be using LiDAR.
it would still be gravity? Or,
We probably would not need to collect any new gravity
Oh,
data.
okay.
That looked like a pretty extensive gravity set that was based on. We probably, based on your interest for that, I think we'd want to go back and we'd want to find that original work that we did.
the 3D, yeah, that'd
And,
be the
get it
360.
back online again so that
Yeah.
you could use it and take a look at it yourselves. I'm sure that data would be archived and available someplace out there. So we would have that. And that would be a good thing to put online for your residents, the entire community. And once it's up there for keeps.
Mhm.
It would be available for the future. Yes.
One of the things that we've thought about, and not a lot lately, is that eventually sewers are gonna have to come here. Is this helping us to kind of understand that process?
It does. It will tell you, back up a few slides. Back up more. One more. One more. One more. One more. There we go. This information here. This is an estimate of,
Oh, unsewered, I see.
of the unsewered arrival times of water. If you shut that off, that will dry up. I don't know, and it might be something to investigate. I don't know if the drying of this is a mirror image or if it's something else. So if you build this, it took 50 years for it to get down there. If you build a sewer, you're gonna get the benefit of delayed drainage for another 50 years, or is it gonna cease before that? I don't know the answer to that question. We would have to look at that. If you collect it in the sewer system, you're gonna face some of the same challenges that were faced by high desert there. And that you'll probably want to treat it to remove nitrate, which would be a good thing because it would keep the nitrogen balance of the basin low. But you're generating either a salt brine if you reverse osmosis or some sort of treatment waste, just depending on how you treat it. So you'll have a disposal charge of what to do with that. And then your leakage across the basin from the septage will eventually go away. And of course, you'll be able to recharge that
Right.
water at a point location. And so it will behave more like this.
Right.
And maybe you can have some management option that you can do there, but those choices are out in the future.
It might not happen in my lifetime, but it's something to be aware of anyway.
Right, and one thing particularly, there was a lot of foresight here a number of years ago with construction of the Malamo pipeline and making sure that you did have access to an imported water supply to augment your local supply. And, again, you're talking about foresight because you're looking at issues and consequences of them that are going to benefit your children or your children's children, not you directly. But this is the only resource that you have. And it looks like a lot if you back up some more. Keep going. Okay, this is good. Yeah, it looks like there's a lot of water there.
Right.
There is,
Right.
but much of it is not really available to you. It's very deep. These materials are poorly permeable. And they may have very objectionable water quality with respect to many things. So you're really living on this little sliver of the system here, which has already been impacted by 50 years of plumbing.
Would it be important for us to explore that little sliver of water in the depths there to
Mhm.
see where pumping would be optimal in regards to chromium-6 levels?
Yes, I think that would be very important. One of the basic tools that we have for that is these multiple wells that we put in when we would drill, we pull materials out, we put a well in there, we look at water levels, we look at water qualities within there. And more importantly, we would monitor them through extended periods of time. There are different stresses that would develop within the basin. And you don't have those. You know, at some point, with the push in sustainability in California, they're going to want to see that type of data into the future at some point, so that you can answer very specifically those questions.
What the quality is at each depth.
At each depth, what zones produce the most, what zones you want to develop for water supply, what zones are you want to say, oh, maybe we don't want to pump this because it's bad and use it in the use or something like that. So, but those are decisions that you have to have knowledge in order to even answer questions before you begin.
CAC Chair David Carrillo, do you have any questions or comments?
One question. So you're saying that if you go to a different level, maybe there isn't so much chromium-6 there, that we could start pumping from there, and if it has anything else in there, we might be able to mitigate that problem with stuff we already have.
Quite
So it
potentially.
would be less costly for us
That's,
than
I
building
was thinking of that
something
too.
massive.
Yeah, blending, my understanding is that you already have a centralized distribution system. So blending of water gives you a lot of flexibility. Go forward, please. Another one. This one here.
Oh,
This, I'm only showing water quality variations with depth. Usually when we do this, we actually collect what we call a flow log from these wells. And so that tells us how much water enters at these particular depths. And so that allows you to do mass balance calculations, to calculate actually what's in these zones and what's in these different layers, and then how important they are to the quality of the well. That may allow you to re-engineer the well to exclude certain contaminants. If I were to give you a ballpark generalization, the generalization would be your nitrate concentrations are going to be higher near the water table, depending upon the density of unserved residential development. Your chromium concentrations will be higher. So you've got this balancing act
no.
where you're, you know, you've got two constituents that are objections. You know, can you take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and end up with a water supply that's very good for public distribution?
We have a very short timeline in which to comply with the new chromium-6
Mhm.
standard. And how long would a study like that take to look at those varying depths?
You know, it's not easy to collect data like this, but it's doable. This is a week worth of exercise, a week's exercise to go ahead and do that sort of work. So
With the existing wells that.
well, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
normally, you know, sometimes you get done quicker, sometimes you get done later, but normally, I would go into a well and we'd get access, we'd collect the flow log. On the basis of the flow log, we would then decide depths that we want to collect samples from to just determine what the quality of water is that's coming in there. And then we'll go ahead and collect those samples in a couple of days. There's lots of ways to skin a cat. And we have patented technology to get into the well with the pump still there, so you're actually accessing it at pumping conditions. 400 feet is a long ways to water. If you're doing routine maintenance on a well, that's a good time to get in there because you've got the pump calling up. You get in there with standard geophysical equipment and you get a lot more data. And this is the sort of thing that's like, if you're gonna do it, don't cheap out.
Right.
You know, spend the money because getting access and getting there and doing it is where the cost is. You know, the additional cost for a few extra analytics, additional cost for another geophysical log, that's quite literally chump change compared to the issue of accessing the well. And we have, you've seen some of the data, I didn't show it here, but some of the data that we have from various wells where we've done this in your basin. So these are things that are doable. Once you get started, that's always worth the work. And the one thing, you know, usually we walk off the site and I try to have that data worked up to the extent possible when we walk out. And so Friday, night at 10 o'clock or that's staggering along, but I can hand you when we walk up the site, you know, work up with the data that's right there. Here's what we got. Here's what it looks like. Here's what we think is gonna happen when we get stuff back from the lab. And so and I have never walked away from a site where we've done this work without saying, I would have never guessed that. It's always enlightening, and it's always something that you probably didn't realize before you had these numbers. And once you have them, you say, oh yeah, that's really obvious. But until you make the measurements, I would have never guessed that.
Does that have to be done at every well site, since they're all geographically different?
Well, you know, you can make choices. You can go with the most important ones first. You know, at some point, you're gonna say we have enough data and enough understanding.
To explore existing similarities between wells now and say, okay, I think we're probably gonna be similar.
You have information that you can generalize on, when you put the wells in, you collect your driller's log. You have geophysical logs for the wells, so you can make generalizations. This well, this unit in this well looks about the same as this unit in that well. Maybe behaving similar, the well overall was behaving similar. So you may not need to do every well, and that may be a choice you can make. Where do you begin and then where do you stop?
This is the type of work that's outlined in task 2.
Oh, it's task 2 work.
Right,
Doesn't need to be.
doesn't have to be
but
two.
We discussed this first. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Easy enough to do. You know, like say, our goal is to do what you need. And I don't have any regulatory responsibility or public health issue driving me or any land management responsibility that makes me say, yeah, you want to do this because it meets my mandate. Do it.
So task 1 was the 1.5 years or so that
Yeah.
Vice President Doolittle just discussed. How long will task 2 be?
You could start task 2 with task 1. That would depend on how many wells you're gonna do. You could start it next month. You know, if you wanted the data, if we, you know, if we wanted to move out there, we have equipment, we have, staff, that's the sort of stuff. You could start building it.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but is it worthwhile? I realize there's future need to have this information as you discussed before, but do you think it would be probable that we might get very lucky in being able to adjust where we're pumping from to potentially find a solution to meet the new MCL based on what we already have?
That was part of what we had originally written up in the task 1. Just take a look at the mass balance of what you have, what the wells are producing now, what they're likely to be producing in the future. And can we get to that objective with what we just have in front of us? Can we meet those needs and get to those questions relatively quickly and relatively painlessly? That gets you under the regulatory hammer, but that gives you and buys you time then to go and delve into the questions.
I see. Okay.
For task 2, in terms of time out, it's a week per well to do the data. That we do need to send it out to get the laboratory results back for the chemistry. And then we will, all the data we collect, becomes publicly available. So there will need to be a data release of some sort.
Right.
So the data can be out there at a minimum soon, but if you want an interpretive product, that extends a little bit
Okay.
through our review process. And what does it mean? We can get you the data, publish that, but if you want to know what it means, that can extend some of
But
that.
the data can be used to help guide us in our Carbon 6
Oh, yeah.
analysis.
And like I say, my objective when I do this, at least the data things that I can measure in the field, I try to walk up the site and just hand it right to you. You know, some of those analyses, if you're talking groundwater age dating carbon 14 or so, you may be looking at a year turnaround to get that information. If you're talking chromium 6, I can get that information probably out of the lab in a week if I pull all my friends together and say all the favors that you owe me, will you do this quickly? I know people who do
But also timing it with the maintenance of the pumps is important.
that makes it much easier if, in the equipment that we have and that these were collected with is a high pressure airline. Essentially, everything on there is less than 1 inch in diameter. So it's meant to thread through the surface location in the well where you take a steel tape or and make a measurement from the water level. But going 400 feet with a piece of equipment like that into a well, even deeper than that, because you're getting below the bowls, that can be, that can be very difficult work sometimes. So if it could be timed where you're doing this on the well and either the column is removed or the pump and the column have been lifted and moved over so that we have better access, it just makes things go that much smoother. And it's really nice to be able to guarantee success rather than saying, yeah, we can put this piece of equipment in there. I think we can get through, but I like to be able to guarantee it. So that's why access is important.
Makes sense.
We mobilize pretty quick to our team in a couple weeks. Typically, figure out what staff are available and make sure equipment's not in, central.
We start asking real detailed questions about, what is the pump casing diameter, but what are the pump bowl diameters? How much space are we likely to have in there? Where are they hung? How deep they are? What are the columns looking like? And things like that, so that we know where we have the best chances for success.
And so task 2 and 3 are dependent on task 1, and task 1 has the pretty hefty price tag. Do we see a
task 2 could start immediately. We don't have to wait for task 1 on that.
okay?
Say concurrently, yeah.
And I don't want to minimize the cost of a data set here like that. Probably looking to get into a well, collect a good flow log, collect samples with depth throughout the well. I mean, that's a $50,000 tank there too. And that'd be
Per well.
Yeah, so
That's what I was wondering if we could negotiate a well price, yeah.
In contrast to that, to replace the monitoring well site at the cemetery, that cemetery monitoring well, that's anywhere from $500 to $1,000. So that well site that you have there is a very expensive piece of monitoring equipment that you want to make sure is well taken care of through the years, because you're not going to replace that right now. Those are very expensive things.
CAC member Smith, do you have a observation or comment?
No, at this time, I don't think processing a little bit of it right now.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. Well, if we have nothing.
Other than, obviously, it makes sense to try and coordinate it when you're servicing the well. To make it easier to access. And
Right.
if it's all possible, see more advantageous.
And it seems to me that there should be some coordination with what Jacobs is doing, obviously. No, right, because they're just considering solutions, but there might be some, just.
With the analysis.
Yeah,
Yes.
integration points is what I was thinking. I just wanted to say, if I may, that, I feel like we're really lucky to have Dr. Isbicki's long research experience with us here and his knowledge of past data. I mean, because, we could easily not have that. So it's great. I think that we should consider, moving forward because we have that. And this was really great. I mean, I'm thrilled with this content and I'm looking forward to getting a transcript after we post it on YouTube. That's why I didn't even take any notes because I was like, wow, it's so dense. I'm going to have to, study this more.
Take a look at some of those reports.
I have.
So-
I sure have. Yeah, in the past, I already have done that. Mhm.
And if you have.
I know Nishikawa's name and everything, and I've seen his video. We have a video with him somewhere, so.
If you've got any questions, feel free to just call. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
Drop me an email or whatever, and I'll be happy to.
Where are you guys from?
San Diego is where our office is.
And if I could say, we are really lucky. I agree with you. John's you're mostly retired.
I work about 2 days a week, right?
Yeah. So, but he loves Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
So we're really lucky to bring him out of retirement.
I made Jeff eat at one of my favorite sandwich shops.
And thank you to Jeff too.
Yeah.
So I'm new to this area. I don't have the decades of experience yet, but I'm really happy to be here. So
I would say that this information is better late than never. I wish I'd known it, a couple years ago. So I'd be a more informed board member, but I'm really grateful to have it now. I mean, it's fascinating too.
In the future, maybe we could have new board members watch this video.
Something like that.
We'll put it on the orientation.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that for
Or
sure.
give it to him.
But without him describing it, could be gobbledygook too.
Well, without your questions, thank you so much for asking questions. Definitely, I was intent on like zooming through as quickly as I could, so I'm glad you had the patience to ask questions.
Yeah, I think actually your presentation was 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
But added the rest of the time.
Okay.
So should I'd like some direction from the board if I should be working with USGS on possibly a more formal proposal that we can bring to the board for consideration in alignment, of course, with the Chromium 6 analysis with Jacobs. I think there's some not just interesting information, but information that we could use if it doesn't work out, that we don't have a different level of Chromium 6 at different depths.
Right?
It's still going to give us future information
Right.
for managing our aquifers, using best practices and long-term sustainability.
Well, after, if the current report is 20 years old,
Yeah.
seems like a professional thing to do if we want to observe our mission up there, acknowledge that and proceed apace to accomplish that. I would say yes.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And but we will be measuring some other contaminants such as, nitrate. I know that I hate to call chromium a contaminant when it's naturally occurring, but such as nitrate. So we'd have that data related to wastewater, et cetera, because I think that's important for grants going forward, that we have that updated. So
Really concerned about things like personal healthcare products and medicines and such like that. Advance to one slide, please. This well here up the slope, and I think you said it's still there. You see it in the vault alongside the road, JTUZ1. It's about half septage right now. That would be a good place to look and see. Do a complete, very expensive scan on things like medicines that one might see there, things like personal care products, things like that might be getting down to the water table. And if it's not here, chances are you're
right, we don't have to do it anywhere else.
Yeah.
I myself would be highly interested in that. And again, it gets back to, I've always wanted us to kind of personalize our aquifers. Like in Austin, Texas, they have Save Our Springs. It was very successful for people not putting things, down the toilets and being careful of motor oil and all that sort of stuff. And, I'd certainly like to see have some data to back up some messaging about that.
So as a
policy direction.
side story, it's funny or not, maybe I shouldn't tell it. I did a lot of work on septic at Malibu. And if you ever watched Three's Company, those homes along the beach there, they're all on septic. And so we sampled all the septic tanks and we analyzed those for a very complete suite of personal healthcare products, medicines, things like that. I had to sign agreements that I would not disclose.
What?
Because
What you found?
this is the Hollywood rich and famous.
Right, yeah.
I'm finding Prozac in there.
Right, oh, right.
We had to ensure that data
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
So, nobody out here is on Prozac.
Whose company was it?
Would it be pretty? Look at the recharge that we do get also from the hospital's treatment facility and what impacts that has.
And
on
it
our
might be,
aquifer.
so do you recharge that in your ponds?
No, it is, there's a treatment facility there, but there is a byproduct that just goes back to
And-
after it's been through treatment.
That might be worth analyzing just to sit in. I could imagine there could be some things that you at least want to be aware of.
And the recharge that we receive from it.
Yes.
It's
Oh, yeah.
using
Now,
treatment facility.
they may get a little skittish on that. And,
We
you know, that-
manage the treatment facility, so I think that we would have the ability to work with them and
Okay, yeah. But yeah, I would think that would be something that one might want to know.
Yeah, I'm sorry to keep, like, we're putting together a laundry list of things, but something that I've been concerned about, and I've contacted people was, and I never got any information about it, was, is there PFAS in the water that's coming down through the pipeline? And then we're recharging our basin with that. And, maybe that's not an issue, but I would just be curious about that. And if y'all had any data.
Charged water does not have PFAS.
Okay.
The state does test for that. That's what we've,
So they've tested the recharge water.
yeah, it does get tested.
The state said that.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay.
That said, that water does have a unique composition with respect to its isotopic composition of the water molecules themselves.
Mhm.
It also has a unique composition with respect to chloride and bromide. The water passes through the delta, the San Joaquin and Sacramento rivers, and it picks up a chloride and bromide burden there. Usually it gets up to, maybe 90 or so. Milligrams per liter of your local water is 6 or 7, maybe 10 more. So I think that's a very good tracer of that imported water. So
And Mojave Water Agency does sampling too at the turnout, which I think Director Fick and Director Jarlsberg were on a tour recently. I'm not sure if you went to the turnout. Didn't get to go, no.
We'll talk about that, I'm
Okay.
sure.
Well, anyway, they do sampling at that site too, is my understanding. But in regards to PFAS, USGS did come out and do some sampling about a year ago, maybe a little longer. And the results from that sampling, do you have that information?
As a matter of fact, I got it sent to me by Mike Land. I looked at the stable isotopes. It's on my email system, but not on my computer.
Okay,
So I can't look at it directly. I don't know for sure if he sent me results for things like PFAS and that, but they would be back. I can ask him
Okay.
about that. He should have, in fact, what he sent me was a form that looked like he sent to you all. So he said that it looked like he got that information.
it may have gone to a different department, but I will.
I can look. And I know I have the data in my.
Okay,
I can
yeah, that would be really
pull it and I can
interesting.
send it to you.
Okay, so I think we have some general direction to bring back a worked out proposal on some of the topics we discussed. So
A menu, it sounds like, different things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we do know that there's a high cost to this kind of work, but the work that is done by USGS is both you discussed in the beginning is, it's a very reputable
Right,
agency
right.
that we probably could learn more from anybody else. So would be really
The other thing about our data, because it is all online, it's there forever.
right.
And, this stuff doesn't go away. So if I go away 20 years from now, somebody comes back and find this exact information.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and thanks for bringing us some stuff that we hadn't seen before. I appreciate it.
Okay,
Yeah. Mhm.
you have a good memory to, what we did a number of years ago.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all, and I appreciate the questions.
Yeah. We loved it. We love this.
Thank you. We'll do it again in 20 years.
Jeff, you'll be,
I'll mark it down.
You'll have white hair by then, yeah.
So we excuse them now so they don't have to suffer the rest.
Yeah, you're welcome to stay. You're also welcome to leave. You do have a
oh,
few
go ahead and hit
moments.
the road.
Yes.
Yeah, thank
So
you. I appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much.
Appreciate all.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to get to that.
Alive. Pardon me? Oh, I was gonna walk out with that.
Oh.
It's the tree we're used to.
Bye.
Well, then,
I got quieter with time. I wasn't sure it was still working, but apparently it was.
It was.
Yeah.
Item 9, reports and comments for informational purposes only on subjects not covered by the agenda. Opinions of individual directors are not necessarily the opinions of the board or the district staff. No action will be taken. The board may provide staff with requests for future agenda items. Director reports, Vice President Doolittle.
Oh, so we're not having staff reports or no? Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just looking I don't believe I have anything. I was just gonna look at my, I take little notes on my phone and see what I had for JBWD. But yeah, I just want to thank the district for establishing this session. This was really fantastic. Let's see. Yeah. I did read a report recently, and it was someone who did some research on pools. And, I want to look at that data again sometime. I know that I heard from the district one time that pools really don't use a lot of water. I don't know what, a lot is, and I'm not necessarily asking for something specific, but I'll share that research and maybe it could be shared with the board or something. And now that I've shared it and spoke about it, we can do that. And then I was wondering if we could get a list or see the list of items that we've asked to be on the agenda, because I know that you've been tracking that. I haven't been tracking what others have requested. The reason I ask is because I was recently reading the admin code. It was a Friday night. I didn't have a date. I was home reading the admin code. And I see that it said that agenda items are supposed to be scheduled in a very timely manner when we request them, like, the next meeting or the meeting after that. And I know it's been 6 months or something before we're able to address something. And I understand the reasons for that. But I would just, I wanted to flag that because I know a lot of times we're told things that the admin code blocks us. And I just want to say, here's something that we've been, very tolerant of. And, maybe I'm not going to say we need extra meetings, but I think we need to address the timeliness of some of those things. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Director Fick.
Okay, I'm trying to remember. I think I made a Mojave Water Agency meeting. That's happened since then, so. And I was gonna say, I want to congratulate both our incumbents on their efforts in getting reelected. And they did have worthy opponents. So. And another idea I had is, now that we had a resolution about the investment pools, I was curious as to go through probably class, which would be Crystal of class, and ask what the difference would be between a class investment of 10 million 2 years ago and a life investment of 10 million 2 years ago. And if she would be able to do that for us so that we could compare between two possible investment pools.
I think he could ask her himself, couldn't he?
Well, yeah, I'd probably be smoother if it went through our general manager.
I think it's a staff level.
Okay, I just hated to
Yeah.
give you more work. That's all.
Well, we can.
But yeah, so, but that's a curiosity that I have is because from what the sales angle on it to us was that it does increase yield, and by how much and what the investment and all that.
Class didn't exist 10 years ago?
No, just 2 years, I know.
2 years ago.
10 million 2
I
years.
thought I heard 10.
And I see that right now their yield is still at 5 point something. I just saw that.
It's pretty good.
So we do have the investment, the next portion of the investment pool information coming to the finance committee, scheduled for the finance committee next week. Can we get this information? We probably get this information before then. If we just send an email to her.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so.
all right.
Dr. Jarlsberg.
Yeah, just a couple things. I do appreciate this presentation tonight. I feel like I now have a PhD. Thank you. Also, I wanted to mention that I really appreciate Lisa's efforts on the minutes. I mean, they're very thorough, and we haven't been finding any reason to question them recently, so that's wonderful. I also want to follow up a little bit on what Director Doolittle is saying about future agenda items. It's kind of buried in our reports and comments. And we really haven't been bringing it up a lot. And I think there was discussion some time ago, maybe years, of having a separate line that says future agenda items or requests or suggestions for future agenda items. And I would like to see that on the agenda as a separate line, so that we remember, and maybe even the minutes would reflect what we've put in there, and then that helps us keep track of it. And one of the things I'd like to mention as a potential future agenda item is discussing when customers have unknown causes or of leaks or leaks that are not their fault and they become quite egregious, of more than 10 units or, you know, we talked about this 10-unit thing. I think we need to look at that. But that the money or the cost of those leaks, I think need to be reduced to the first tier. So
what you're talking about is an assistance program, which is slated to be coming to the board very soon. We have a program, it's called the CAP program, and there's a calculation that gives them a reduction in rate if they meet the criteria.
right, but is it to the tier 1?
It's not through tier 1, it's a calculation that is being done.
Okay.
And
I've heard some discussion.
Based off of the large meter rate. Yeah,
So-
which is,
Well, anyway, you're saying it is on the future agenda.
It is,
I don't want to
yes.
discuss it tonight. It's just I
yes.
will bring my thoughts to it when we have the discussion.
And Jane, so I just want to say it's Bighorn View Water District. They don't charge you at the price for tier 2 and tier 3. When you've had one of these issues, they bring it down to tier 1. And if they figured it out, I think that we should investigate it and not immediately say, that's the other ratepayer supplementing that. I think we should investigate it.
I just want to make it clear though, we don't charge for the different tiers when they have a leak. And we ended up putting them into the large meter rate. So it's the combined rate. What do you know it all?
Oh,
I don't know the,
difference of the meter. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to say it's closer to
Tier 2 or 3 per tier. So it's the blended rate for the tiers. And so that way they're not paying on tier 3 and tier 4. They are paying a lower rate. So that we do have that program in place, but we're going to bring it back anyway, explain it thoroughly, and then give some options.
Okay, and that's
Policy
better.
changes.
Yes.
Right.
And that's better than the $100 a year help.
It's
that we
already
have.
there, though. It's in addition to.
That's what I
Yes.
mean.
Yeah,
It's in
yeah.
addition to that.
So we're just gonna take a better deeper
Okay,
dive
all right.
into it and bring it back, and it's already slated to be coming back. It's not going to be immediate, though. We're coming to the end of the year. We have only a few more meetings left this year and a lot of priorities. We have the audit coming up. We have a lot of big ones, and
Yeah.
anyway, I'll explain more about that in a few minutes.
And then I wanted to mention, I did go on the tour, and Director Fick also did, and he might be able to fill in some blanks that I have. My understanding was that I thought when I signed up for it, I got excited to see more detail and maybe even see something to do with the pipeline. And all they did was take us to well 1 in a pumping station, and then it stopped.
What, whose tour?
MWA.
Oh, MWA's tour. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I had heard a report when Director Duda went, I think a couple years ago, that really excited me, and I thought this would be similar, and it wasn't. And also, I thought that part of I don't know how to give them feedback exactly, except that on Monday, they're making a presentation to the dinner meeting that we're going to, and I think I'll bring up some of this to Charlie.
Yeah, that'd be the person I think.
Yeah, and so anyway, I was a little disappointed. I just wanted to say. And I think that's correct. It was just pumping station, which was very interesting and huge, but then it stopped.
I've been on the tour as well, and I had a really nice tour, almost a full day, and saw the turnout, all sorts.
Yeah,
really
No,
wonderful sights.
no,
This is shorter.
yeah.
So,
It ended at lunch, but it it was really 9 to about 11, maybe 9:30 to 11:30. And they would point out things as we were driving on the bus, but
Same.
yeah, not the same. So anyway, it was worth going, but I'm hoping that maybe they'll do something different a little later. I don't know if it was a money thing, maybe. So anyway, I think that's it for me.
Director Short.
Yes, I attended the Great Shakeout along with President Flowen. It was cold and windy, so we didn't have a whole lot of people there and some of the vendors didn't show up, so. But we did have I thought we had a pretty good turnout. There were people waiting to get to our booth because we had a lot of stuff out there. And a lot of good information for people about water emergencies. We touched base on the flushing medicine in the septic tank. We made contact with a woman named Carrie Kish at Reach Out. They actually do a medicine and drug disposal, so that could be something that we could maybe look into to promote, yeah, maybe at the farmer's market. Aside from that, I didn't attend anything. However, I did want to mention on October 21st, I called in a water leak down the street from my house. It was located between a vacant home and an Airbnb, so I don't know how long it was active, although it didn't appear too big. I did want to thank the crew that did it. The time it took from when I called it in to the leak was repaired and the road was patched was just over an hour. I thought that was commendable and shows just how efficient our crew is. That's it for me.
Thank you. When you, General Manager, when you create agendas, do you stack several of them in a series? In other words, month by month, meeting by meeting, where I assume they're prioritized so that can anticipate what's going to be coming in the future. Could you speak to that a little bit?
We plan out the entire year in advance based on every item that has to be heard and brought to the board. Budgets is one, audit is one. There's many that are regular occurrences that you've seen through the year. We schedule those out in the same time frame roughly. There's some changes, and those changes could be where a holiday lands, if there's going to be a vacation plan. But they're minor changes. And then we fill in any of the blank spaces as we go through the year. For instance, tonight with USGS, I've been trying to schedule with them. I was looking back at my emails. This has gone back to the spring. So it's not always on our time frame. Sometimes we have to wait for their availability. We had availability last month, if you remember, and then they, were not well and couldn't come, which was totally understandable. And so then we were able to get them tonight. So a lot of times we have to orchestrate getting people here on their timelines and what our availabilities are. Another example of that was the investment presentation, that Anne had to coordinate with 3 different firms to try to get them to come and do their presentations. And you saw that, one ended up not being able to come. So there's a lot of coordination efforts. It's not a close our eyes and throw a dart at the board and see where it lands. We really look ahead and try to plan. And it's also, there's a coordination piece with the committees. So if something's coming to the board, oftentimes it'll go through the committees, and that's where we try to workshop things out. And sometimes we'll bring it back to staff and we do some more work on that item and then bring it sometimes back through committee, but after committee comes to the full board for review. So there's a whole coordination effort. It takes a lot of time and effort. Each meeting takes a lot of planning in advance. We have to prepare the agenda, but all the items on the agenda, so every staff report, all the backup documentation that goes to a staff report, and then just gathering those things, it goes through multiple review levels. So if Anne has documents, it's going to come to me for a review. If she's working in conjunction with another staff member, that staff member will be involved as well. And then it will go to Lisa for a final review and then be entered onto the agenda. So it's a very coordinated effort with 4 wheels like on a car. And if one wheel falls off, it kind of, makes it more challenging. It takes the whole village to make it happen. It's not a willy-nilly kind of thing. And we do keep a list. Lisa's actually just gone back in time to make sure we have a thorough list of any board member requests that we have to complete. And I went through it briefly. I haven't fully reviewed it. We just put it together and found that a huge majority of those things have been brought back. So it's coming through. Some things do take longer, and we have to always remember what's our obligation and what can be put back. So the investment policy was an example that took a lot of effort, research, and coordination from Anne, and then getting those folks to be able to come and present. So that took a couple of months to get that together because there's still regular work that has to get done. So these are these in addition to items that sometimes they're not going to get the attention as quickly because we have the regular work has to get done. And right now we're having a little dip with staff too. So that's making things a little more challenging as we've gone through in the past. But
So just a couple of things.
Sure.
One is, I think it took at least 6 months before we even got the presentation on the investment thing. So it wasn't a couple months. But the other thing is that I thought that the president was involved in agenda creation and what goes on the agenda. And I certainly think if I were president, I would want that. And so I hope that that's actually what's occurring. And, is that not occurring?
Is it? I thought it was happening that way
Well,
too.
bear in mind too, that the president of the board has to have a depth of understanding of the activities that happen in the office too, in order to give a valid opinion about the priorities that go into these things too, and also the availability of staff, the expertise of staff to come up with meaningful recommendations and such that goes with it. And also too, there's a thing to where we just can't, this is where it could be a board discussion before we do come up with a recommendation, but that we just don't put staff or exercise staff greatly to make a report on a request and then have the board collectively go, and then that's the end of it.
Well, yeah, we don't want to do
That
that,
kind of
but are you saying no? Is this your
No.
way of saying no, that you don't?
it's not saying no.
I was asking him, do you coordinate with the agenda? Like what goes on the agenda?
Specifically, no. I will hear of things that might be coming down the pike, down the path, or something that's pending, but I think we need to rely on the general manager to prioritize these things because she knows intimately what's going on around here, day by day. Jane, did you have something?
Well, yeah, I just thought, I thought that was kind of a routine that the president would be there during the discussion, not necessarily, saying what it should be, but to be there and have some input if it's necessary.
Well, it's not formal, but Tom and I do meet on a regular basis, and I have the board outside of my office that shows what we have planned for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
And so there is not a formal process where he comes and says,
No.
yes, this, no, this, yes, this. He sees it, we discuss it, and he knows sometimes it's going to get moved around.
But is that an agenda meeting?
It's
mean,
not
it's
an
a-
agenda meeting.
It's just the
Usually
communication
it's
between
usually
them.
Before our board meetings, we will have a check-in, and,
Okay.
the board is
Has
there.
that ever happened? Because I thought, I kind of would,
Historically,
yeah.
I wouldn't know.
Tom and I have,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because that concerns me a little bit because I thought that the president would be representing the board's requests and interests and prioritizing those and not relying on the district solely to say what the importance is or the timeline. Now, obviously, I appreciate that there's all those factors that she's having to consider and all those spinning plates and everything. But I feel like without the president being engaged on that, our interests or priorities related to governance, which is what this is not being represented.
Well, let's consider that in that disclosure that I read, the last sentence is the board may provide staff with requests for future agenda items. And so somehow there should be a process to where, as I said earlier, we discuss the types of things that we do have an interest in. Because we are the community, we are representatives of the
Yeah.
community, and we're expressing potentially interests from the community that they would want to have addressed. I understand that, but well, that's why you then have a meeting with the general manager, because she has an input on priorities then, because she will have priorities that I have no idea of until we have this meeting, and she's penciled out agenda items that are going to carry on for it's a 12-month year, not the fiscal.
A 12-month year, we've
And she,
calendar together.
when she was first discussing this, there was this anxiety in her voice about how there's only 2 months left in the year, and there's so much that she wants
Yeah.
to accomplish.
I understand that.
It looks like Jeff's about to say something, is he?
I was getting close. I appreciate the irony of my comment, but I do think it's starting to evolve into a board discussion on this item, so it should be something. And again, the irony, but that is brought back on an agenda for further discussion. If it's gonna be a discussion.
Yep.
That is an irony. Yeah, like that.
I'm disappointed.
And thank you for the help of the civilians emergency response team at the Great Shakeout too. They swarmed us at the end to help us pick up all of our stuff and put it in my truck. It was indeed a truckload of stuff. A lot of it we didn't use, but I tend to exaggerate what I think we're going to need there for that thing. But yeah, it went very well. We had some meaningful conversations, but not with a lot of people. This thing on drugs and stuff in the water supply, we very frequently point out to people that we have the household waste dump on the third Saturday of the month, starting at 9 o'clock over here on the highway, just east of the big annoying billboard there. And the special thanks to the lady too that she provided me with some containers and stuff like that, some that you can actually use in the mail and other household ones. But so she was really good. Even when we were setting up the tent, one of the pins that holds the legs up at a certain level was absent. And among her bling things that she had on her table were a collection of pins that she would hand out to people. And so she dismantled one of those pins for us, and we use it as a pin to hold the leg of our tent up. It's been fixed, by the way.
President.
Something changed?
Just really quick, there are 2 places that I'm aware of that take pills. One is Star Pharmacy and the other is the county building where in the main lobby, there's a big.
That was in the newsletter.
Yeah, I know you've publicized it, but I don't know if you know about Star Market.
Yeah,
They'll take them too.
that's where I get my,
Do they only take pills or?
Just pills.
Tablets, so they don't take sharps or anything?
No,
Okay.
right.
this lady that we mentioned a couple of times, she actually mentioned that people are, not only flushing their drugs, but the needle that they use, like bend it in half and flush that.
Oh, no.
Which was really here. But yeah, I don't know that they've had that in Star Pharmacy, that receptacle for very long. It's about the size of our podium.
Yeah, it's green right inside the door.
Yeah. General Manager's report.
All right, so I am very excited to share that after 8 years of persistence, Copper Mountain College has developed 5 water technology courses: a distribution, a treatment, a career pathways, a wastewater, and a water fundamentals course. I had the pleasure of reviewing them along with Adriana and our HR department. They asked us to provide all sorts of feedback, in which we did, and turned that into them, and they've incorporated all the feedback back into those. And now the courses are under review for approval If all goes well, CNC will offer those courses in either August 2025 or January 2026.
Ooh,
So it's been a long journey. I'm very excited to see this get off the ground. The commitment to this has been since 2016. I have not let it go, so.
Congratulations.
Whether or not they get people in the seats is another question, because there may not be enough people to.
Can't we take some classes?
Sure, I beg you.
oh, totally.
So, I'm very excited to see that, just the gentle pushing over the years. Every time we got the ball going, someone left and moved on to a
Right.
different position, and it dropped multiple times, but finally we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And then likewise with a lot of the other reported meetings, lots and lots of meetings over the last couple of weeks. I also attended the San Bernardino County Land Use Meeting, met a couple of nice folks from the county, made some contacts so that we have that if we need that in the future. I've been selected somehow, I'm sure probably one of you maybe asked for me to participate in San Bernardino County's Drought Task Force, helping them write their Drought Task Force plan. So I've been participating in that as well. Strategic planning, of course, we are starting to make progress on that final draft. And then tomorrow, President Flowen and I are going to do an olive tree tour for one of our customers here in the Joshua Tree area, who has an olive tree that he has, an olive tree farm that apparently he has put together a sustainable low water use farm, is my understanding. So more to be learned on that.
Beans or something?
I don't know. That's tomorrow. I didn't
An
go- I
olive
didn't go
tree?
yet.
Oh, my God, yeah,
There's
okay.
also a pistachio farm and he sells pistachios
Oh,
and
nice.
Joshua trees too. So we might need to get an agricultural.
Sure, yeah.
Well,
Off of Sunshare, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of them, but he has it in another place too.
all right, that's the end of my report.
Are you busy enough? You keep it busy?
No,
Yeah.
Just kidding.
no, I need more, please.
Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Very well. This meeting is adjourned. Future director meetings are on the very end of the